proposed by some of the members.
Hey, are we good? Okay, thank you so much for joining us. We have a lot of exciting information to cover today in this session on our Responsible AI Strategy for the Environment project. Since there is so much to go through, I'm going to be very brief and immediately hand it over to our lovely moderators today, Johannes and Nico, to start us off. They are not coming through in the room. Slide, and Nico and Johannes should be speaking.
I'm not authorized to change the position from abstaining to.
And I'll resume.
Hang on, Nico and Johannes, we can't hear you in the room right now.
No worries.
I hear Nico. I see Nico.
Et voilà.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. And as I was saying, I'm just going to repeat myself. Let me first open up by thanking you, Stephanie and Johannes, and thanking the entire team at SEMIA for your wonderful support in managing that project and bringing all of these deliverables that we're going to discuss and reports, bringing them to light. We come together as a project. We come together as a project with also collaboration, of course, with OECD and collaboration with so many other organizations to make an impact. To make an impact in leveraging responsibly AI for climate action and biodiversity preservation. And that impact cannot happen if we don't put on the table interesting deliverables to help inform policy and private sector action. And that's number one, that's our job. But on the other side of the line, from the other stakeholders in the community, starting with governments, the members of GPAI, this impact cannot take place if members do not engage with this work and take that work forward into a fruitful feedback loop between the work of the project and the work that they carry forward. And that's very much the spirit of today. The spirit of today is to discuss and present to you the reports that we are putting on the table at the occasion of this GPAI Summit for deeper engagement and collaboration. And so we're going to get right into it. Am I forgetting anything, Johannes? Or do you want to add a few words and welcome everyone?
I think that was a perfect introduction. Thanks everyone for being here, both online and in person in Japan. We have a pretty packed agenda, so I would head it off right now. If we do have the technical capabilities, we can do a quick tour de table
Yes.
of people in the room in Tokyo. Stephanie, does that work technically?
Can we know how many people approximately we have in the room, and if there are few people, we can go around the room, because we don't see that. For you in the audience, we don't know who is in the room, since it's a hybrid event. We'd like to know.
Yeah, so right now we have 4 wonderful attendees with us in the room today. I am walking over to them with a microphone. We're doing this quite often.
Don't be shy.
Folks. So I think Nico's request is that you lovely folks will introduce yourselves and maybe talk a little bit about what brings you to the session today, if you're so willing.
Hi, Nico. Marco speaking here. Well, as you know, I'm working with OECD, Council of Europe, GPAI, UNESCO, right, on all kinds of AI policy-related things.
Hello, I'm Simon Kennedy. I'm the Deputy Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development for the Government of Canada, and we are one of the funders and obviously members of GPAI, so it's nice to be here. Thanks.
Thank you so much. There you go.
Hi, I am a software engineer from Citadel AI, and I am interested. My main area is MLOps, and I am interested in the title from theory to practice. It is my work. so yeah. Thank you. Sorry.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Joanna from Hong Kong. I work for Heinrich Böll Stiftung, which is a German political foundation, and I work in the environmental program. And I come here to learn more about AI, and especially environment and climate change, and to network new people. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we have a few new joiners in the room since we started this process. So if you'd like to say a few words, introduce yourself, why you're interested in being here for the session.
My name is Ben Gill. I'm the head of Asia Pacific for Brainbox AI, which is a product out of Montreal, Canada, a solution that helps decarbonize buildings. So it's right in our sweet spot.
Thank you so much. Coming around to the front, we have two folks here that I met earlier at lunch.
Hi, I'm Rose Woolhouse. I work in the UK's Office for Artificial Intelligence, which is a joint unit between our Department for Digital and Department for Business. And very much looking forward to the discussions today. We cover a wide range of AI policy in the Office for AI, and climate change is something that we see AI having huge potential to help with. I'll hand over to my colleague.
Hello everyone, I'm Blake Bauer. I'm the leader of the Office for AI in the UK government and head of delegation here.
Perfect, thank you. And then we have one more last attendee who you will meet more later on, but I'll let her introduce herself very quickly now.
Hi, I'm Arunima Sarkar. I'm with the World Economic Forum, leading some of the global initiatives on responsible AI and applied AI. And we are also working in collaboration with GPAI in some of the work around AI and climate. I'll be talking briefly about one of our initiatives later in this discussion.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Nico and Johannes, back over to you for our intro on RAISE.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Stephanie. Can we have the slides up there, and we'll get going with the presentation. And thanks, participants, for playing the game. It gives us a good perspective, and it's multi-stakeholder participation in the room, which is great to including GPAI members. I've heard Canada, I've heard the UK. That's great. Thanks for being here. Appreciate your support there. All right, do your next slide, please. I'm going to present this one, and then Johannes, you want to do the next one, and then we'll alternate and we'll find the right way. So I won't repeat at length because we have a packed schedule what I've said in the session just before. Just remember that Project RAISE stands for Responsible AI Strategy for the Environment. And it's really about developing and operationalizing, and the word operationalizing here is important, operationalizing a global responsible AI adoption strategy for climate action and biodiversity preservation. We want to find the right pathway. We want to reject techno-solutionism, but also reject technophobic approaches. AI can do tremendous good, so long as we find the right way and we don't exaggerate what it can do and the good it can do. And so we have tried to walk the fine line, and that's something we're going to continue to be going. This includes, as part of long-term objectives, well, we need to implement a strategic roadmap based on use cases, but also develop impact and risk assessment frameworks to harness AI for good, and good in that situation of climate action and biodiversity preservation. And key work, and that's why we opened the session with Johannes trying to understand a bit more who is in the room. It's really about working with the institutional partners to make that work relevant. That includes the COP, of course, COP Climate, just ended in Sharm el-Sheikh in a bit of a disappointing way, but also COP Biodiversity, which will take place in Montreal a few weeks down the line in December. And I'm very happy that Raja and Lee are co-leading that project with me. I want to recognize their work, and I also want to recognize, as I said before, the work of you, Johannes, of Stephanie, of Arnaud, and the entire team at SEMIA in supporting that project. And also want to recognize the OECD and OECD IGO and celebrate the great work that is bringing us together around this project. Next slide, please. And why don't you present a little bit the coalition we've tried to build, Johannes?
Yeah, exactly. So just as Nico said, in the spirit of anchoring the work with institutional partners, with institutions, with research organizations, we have a wide range of existing collaborations and partnerships. One of the key here, of course, being the one with the OECD and the joint report we did on the environmental footprint of AI, which was presented at COP27 last week. And Celine and I will present it a bit more in detail later on in the session. Then we have our amazing delivery partners. Pete from the Center for AI and Climate is here today, and will present the work we've been doing with him over the past year. Also in a coalition and consortium with Oxford University, with KPMG, the WWF. And on top of that, we engage with a variety of other stakeholders, including UNEP and their Coalition for Digital Environmental Sustainability, with the World Economic Forum, with the IEEE and their Planet Positive initiative, and with Brookings and the National Science Foundation in one of their research networks. So as you can see, a wide range of stakeholders. We try to engage with each of them because there's a tremendous energy and like a tremendous momentum in that field, and we try to bring them together to not double the work, to get all the key players together, and yeah, we've seen some great output from these collaborations.
Next slide, please. So RAISE, and our focus is based on two pillars: climate action and biodiversity preservation. And what we have tried to do is go, and this is something we started last year, go after responsible AI for climate action to lay the groundwork for that. And there's a level of maturity in terms of where the intersection between AI and climate action are, and biodiversity preservation. We've started to do the scoping work on biodiversity preservation, and we're going to report to present to you the report that we commissioned this year. But it seemed very important to us that we start and work with these two communities first separately. We tend at times to overestimate and exaggerate the level of synergies that exist between climate action and biodiversity preservation. Of course, they are there, but there are also divergences, but there are also tensions. It was very important for us to start from where these communities are at in terms of their situation, to try and define what responsible AI would mean in that context, to then bring them together and try and align them and reconcile them. And so these two pillars, have led to the first report we did on AI and climate action this year, and last year and this year. It's about implementing and moving towards the implementation of this report. And you'll hear the two reports we're putting on the table, and you'll hear them presented in a minute. And as I said, about starting the journey in terms of what does responsible AI for biodiversity preservation means, and that's something we're going to present also today. But beyond that, RAISE has also acted as, in a way, a mini center of expertise across the Global Partnership on AI, different working groups, and we have supported the Innovation and Commercialization Working Group project, and Lee has been working very intensely on data licenses, and we have also supported the work of the Data Governance Working Group on Privacy Enhancing Technologies Plus, and on beyond that, data institution, and we have a project starting next year with the support from the UK government with the Centre on AI and Climate on data space. So it's really net zero data space. It's really about irrigating the Global Partnership on AI various working groups with better expertise and knowledge over climate action and biodiversity preservation. Next slide, please. The three reports we are putting on the table we're going to discuss are these three. First, this joint report with the OECD on the energy and water consumption footprints of AI compute. Second, a sector-specific AI adoption booklet focused on the sector of energy, particularly electricity. And third is responsible AI for biodiversity report. Next slide. Johannes, do you want to present a bit where we're going next year before we jump into the three publications?
Sure. Also very briefly, because we'll hear about especially the net zero data space later on the session, which is an amazing initiative that we've been kicking off already, but that's going to really take off beginning of next year. In terms of AI readiness, we'll present the electricity booklet today, but we are focusing on three more sectors, which together are pretty much the four most important sectors in terms of decarbonization and getting to net zero. So a booklet on agriculture, a booklet on transportation, and one on heavy industries and foundation industries. The third one is really doing the same thing that we did for climate change this year for the biodiversity report, meaning implementing and operationalizing the recommendations of the report this year. Also in the spirit of today's session, from theory to practice, since we don't only want to give recommendations, we actually want to start going into practice. Fourth, a joint workshop with the IPCC and IPBS, since we now have kind of the twin reports on climate change and biodiversity, and a lot of the recommendations actually are in a similar spirit. We will work towards organizing a joint workshop with those two institutions and trying to find synergies where AI can help both climate change and biodiversity, maybe where also the differences. And really work with those two institutions as they're central in the fight against climate change and biodiversity degradation. So those are some of the highlight activities. And
maybe we should pass on to Lee to introduce the first publication. And let me take the opportunity to thank you for being with us, Lee. I know it's like, I think it's 3 a.m. on your side of the pond. So let me commend your commitment to the success of our project. Appreciate you being here with us today. Over to you, Lee.
Great. Well, thanks, Nico, and I'll keep this really brief. Now we're going to turn to discussing our deliverables, and we'll start with the AI for Net Zero readiness booklet for the electricity sector. As Johannes mentioned, this booklet builds on our 2021 AI and climate report and really seeks to translate theory into practice by providing concrete guidance to the electricity sector on how to achieve net zero. In preparing this report, as Nico and Johannes said, we really want to draw upon our experts so we can really delve into the issue and look at it from all different perspectives. One of our experts is here today, Peter Kluttenbark, co-founder of the Center for AI and Climate, and he was instrumental in the report. And I'll now turn it over to Pete to discuss our findings and advice with you. Pete, please take it away.
Thanks very much, Lee, and thanks very much to the Project Raise co-leads and to the rest of the SAMIR team. It's been great working with the GPAI family on this one. Can I get the slides up for the project, please? They're not seeming to appear to me at the moment. Where have they gone? Is it just me who can't see them, or can everyone else see them?
I cannot see them on the screen, the feedback I have. In the room, can you see the slides?
Here they are.
There we go. Thank you. That seems to be working now. Yeah, if we can go to the next slide, that would be great. Now they've gone again. Okay, so the first project, this project that I'm going to be talking to now is about AI for net zero. And the context for this particular project is that last year, the Center for AI and Climate Change was working with GPAI again on a report around AI and climate change writ large and how AI can be used to support climate action. One of the bottlenecks identified as part of that report was that organizations in the sectors that we care about most when it comes to climate change, in energy and transport and land use and industry, often don't really understand exactly what the prerequisites are in order for them to actually start deploying AI to support their net zero objectives. So the idea of this booklet, this report, is to give them a bit of a plan, a bit of a roadmap in terms of what their organizations need to be thinking about in getting ready to deploy AI for net zero. And this, as I said, this project was developed by both the Center for AI and Climate, but also DeepMind. It was a collaboration between both Cake and DeepMind for this particular project. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I've just basically talked to this, but yeah, the significant barrier here we're talking to is that organizations just aren't quite understanding about what the prerequisites are at the moment. And what we're doing is developing a series of 4 booklets detailing exactly what they can be doing to develop AI readiness in the sectors that we care about most. Next slide, please. So in terms of the power sector, this is obviously a key sector when it comes to the transition to net zero. It's a heavily regulated sector where the incentive structures are set as much in legislation and regulation as they are by the market itself. So innovation can be challenging with high costs associated with capital deployment. There is a requirement to transition to net zero in this sector, and systemic changes are needed in order to transition to much higher renewables concentrations in grids. And obviously, as we get to, for example, much higher concentrations of solar and wind, and more demand on grids coming from increases in demand for transport and heat and industry, we're going to see a need for much greater levels of digitalization and use of AI to optimize the systems as they become more complex. The foundation industry is much harder to abate. This is a sector that we've been a bit slower on as an economy and a society, but it's one that's becoming increasingly important, and where focus is really going on both increasing the efficiency of existing industrial processes, as well as developing new net zero alternatives, and AI can play a role in both. At the moment, it's more focused on process optimization. In transport, you've got multiple interlocking systems. Data and AI can be applied across all of them. I think this is an area where where perhaps we're seeing AI start to trickle in, but it's still very much in the early stages. And with agriculture is a sector where both we need to be thinking about new ways of generating the foodstuffs we need, whether it's alternatives to meat or things like that, but also optimizing existing processes such as the sort of regenerative agriculture and things like that, and how we can use AI for those. Next slide, please. So as part of these booklets, what we've done is develop a readiness index so that organizations within them can identify where they need to be progressing. And as part of that, we've identified a set of 5 core criteria that organizations need to be thinking about in preparing themselves to become AI ready. First and foremost in this is really AI governance. And this is especially important for organizations in the power sector, where you're dealing with companies that manage nationally critical infrastructure. But there's a real need to have proper governance to manage AI-specific risks, and developing the principles and processes in order to manage those risks. And it's also, as we get more and more policy around AI, whether it's the EU's AI policy or similar policies internationally, there's going to be a need for organizations to consider compliance as well. And again, especially as there are risk-based processes involved, which need to be managed. So AI governance is something that is a prerequisite, really, that needs to be considered as part of the process of developing these of AI projects in this sector. Secondly, human capacity. So effective management of AI requires a really deep and broad understanding of the technology. So executives working in these areas should receive training in both understanding, procuring, and managing AI solutions. As well as executives, we also need to see data scientists who have a combination of both deep data science expertise, but also a deep understanding of the sector in which they work, in this case, electricity. So it's the combination of these skills that's really valuable, the deep domain expertise and the technical expertise. Thirdly, opportunity identification. So the first step is really to identify where AI can be used to support net zero challenges. And what we see is that at the moment, organizations are still slightly just trying to work out exactly what the opportunities are. And there's a bit of capacity building, just not in terms of the deep technical expertise needed, but also just understanding what kinds of problem types AI is well suited to help with. Digital infrastructure. So AI algorithms require enhanced compute and data storage, and companies really need to be assessing what the best solution is for them, both to secure the compute and data storage they need for the initial projects that they're developing, as well as thinking perhaps in the slightly longer term about a rollout for AI more widely across their organizations and what that looks like. So there are key questions around whether or not they want their compute on premises or in the cloud. All of those decisions will need to be made around the specific problem they're trying to address and the organizational makeup of the setup. And finally, data. Again, this is a challenge. Companies will need to really identify the data required for any particular project that they're looking to address. They'll need to review existing internal data, identify data capture needs, invested in data cleaning and labeling to ensure data is AI ready. And all of these things will need to be done in advance of any particular project, but also need to be done more widely across the organization as it seeks to apply AI. And what we've done, as I mentioned at the start, we've sought to develop an index around these readiness considerations so that organizations can really monitor their progress in becoming AI ready. Next slide, please. And as I said, so each of these areas is basically detailing where we've sort of offered a scoring chart so that organizations can map across them and score themselves across these different opportunities. Next slide, please. Fantastic. So that sort of covers this particular project. As Johannes mentioned, the first booklet that we published is around electricity and supporting that sector and thinking about how to become AI ready. We've got 3 more that are going to be coming out over the course of next year on land use and agriculture, on foundation industries, and on transport. So look out for those next year. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Pete, and thanks a lot to you and the Center for your hard work on that. Let me hand over to Raja. Shatila is one of the colleagues of the project, but also serves as the co-chair of the Responsible AI Working Group under which this project is unfolding. Over to you, Raja, to present or to introduce the biodiversity report.
Thank you, Nico. Very briefly, actually, this report about biodiversity follows our report in 2021 about climate change. So biodiversity and climate change are two different issues, but very much actually interrelated. And this report this year was developed by Pete and his team, and he will be presenting it. It benefited from the steering committee, the advisory committee, and GPAI expert who were actually very close to the discussion about this. And specifically, I would like to mention Christian Lemaitre from Mexico. You know that biodiversity is really an issue that raises fundamental questions related to global equity and our economic model. So we have to not be shy about this. And we have involved Global South, GPAI Data Justice Team, from the Data Governance Working Group also, and various stakeholders to reflect on this. So to present Peter will present the findings about actually how to use AI for understanding the drivers behind diversity loss. And this, in this case, the tool is very useful. And also to present also policy recommendations and the strategy for action to use AI for biodiversity preservation. I'm handing the floor back to Pete. Thank you.
Many thanks, Raja. And just to reiterate what Raja said, it was great working with the wider GPAI set of experts on this project. So the context for this project, and again, it would be great if I could have the slides up on this one as well. The context for this project is that obviously biodiversity loss is one of the most critical issues that we're facing as a species, and it requires urgent and coordinated action. But at the moment, despite ongoing conservation efforts, we've seen ongoing declines in biodiversity over recent decades. Our assessment is that artificial intelligence is one tool that offers opportunities to accelerate action on biodiversity conservation. However, it's, again, as with climate change, it's certainly not a silver bullet. And it must be deployed in a way that supports a paradigm shift to new sustainable models of development rather than just entrenching business as usual. So in terms of the objective of the project was to develop an action-oriented roadmap for the responsible use of AI for biodiversity conservation. To get there, I think what we did was we really tried to assess what the current landscape of AI and biodiversity initiatives is at the moment. We tried to identify what the gaps in that landscape were. We proposed a vision for how AI can be applied more widely to support conservation, and identified the bottlenecks to the adoption of that vision. And then we proposed recommendations to achieve the proposed vision, and then the roadmap sprang in terms of how we actually plan to deliver those recommendations. So the project consortium developing the project was led by us, Radiance. Well, I should say I've got a couple of hats on with this conversation. So I'm both a co-founder of the Center for AI and Climate and a lead on Radiance International, which is a consultancy. But we brought together a coalition of organizations from the University of Oxford, WWF, KPMG, and St. Joseph University of Beirut, who drafted the report. Next slide, please. So the overall aim of the report was to go through what the opportunities were and describe a landscape, and then detail the bottlenecks, as I've sort of talked about. We broke it down into a few different sections. So beyond looking at the summaries and the introductions, we focused on what a responsible AI for biodiversity framework looked like, and the risks that are involved in applying AI to this sector. And then sections 4 to 7 offered an assessment of where the opportunities were, what the bottlenecks were to key areas. So the first of those is to understand how we can use AI to understand biodiversity and biodiversity trends. Section 5 was then using AI to understand the drivers of biodiversity loss. 6 was using AI to help with the prioritization of action on biodiversity through its use in things like policy and strategy. And finally, using AI to optimize action on biodiversity with a focus on the private sector. Then we detailed some of the common challenges and recommendations across different key areas when it comes to biodiversity, things like capacity, data and digital infrastructure and funding. And then on the back of those, we put together a roadmap. Next slide, please. So when it comes to the responsible AI for biodiversity framework, we took a risk-based approach. So there are three core types of risk involved in deploying AI for biodiversity. There are impact risks. So there are risks associated with AI being used where it isn't appropriate or where it can't necessarily isn't the right tool for the job. And potentially it can be a distraction. So some organizations are seeking to use it more to distract from fundamental business model change, which is needed in a particular area. There are social risks, and this is quite specific, I think, to biodiversity, where you've got particular usage rights for data. We see a lot of the biodiversity hotspots occurring in areas of the global south, often in areas where you've got indigenous communities or local communities that don't have, that have perhaps ownership over the data rights. You often see companies coming in trying to exploit those data rights, and there are issues around that. There are issues around language and access, which present real challenges in trying to communicate and develop these tools. There are also risks that AI can be used to support repression of environmental activists, with people trying to identify where environmental activists are and things like that. With AI, we're starting to see some of the risks, and more widely, I think perhaps as with data and technological development, we're seeing the risk of a deepening inequality between the global north and south, creating a digital divide. And thirdly, environmental risks. So there are risks associated with AI being used to optimize unsustainable practices. Obviously, when it comes to AI, it's an optimization tool and technology. But if you optimize the wrong things, then you can end up with a bad situation more quickly than you would do otherwise. Next slide, please. So the first key area we want to look at is how we can use AI to understand biodiversity, because conservation relies on good biodiversity baseline measurements and change monitoring. And this has traditionally really involved very time-intensive and manual data collection and analysis. And we're seeing a huge amount of data being collected from a whole range of sources, as this image shows, whether it's from satellite images or drones or on animal sensors or camera traps or bioacoustic sensors, or even, and increasingly importantly, from from citizens through mobile phones. And this all creates a big opportunity, this amount of data. And it creates really an opportunity to develop a much better way of monitoring biodiversity in the future, which is automated, which is distributed, and you can get a much more granular understanding of exactly what's going on. So there are challenges in this. I think it's worth saying that, and some of the, you're seeing existing inequalities between species and ecosystems and regions. I need balanced data collection with data rights of local communities and insufficient AI and awareness capacity. Next slide, please. So as well as being used to understand biodiversity, you can also use it to understand the drivers of biodiversity. So there are 5 core drivers of biodiversity loss: land use change, resource exploitation, climate change, pollution, and invasive species. There are various underlying drivers that sort of sit behind these, around global population growth, trade, travel, and the growth of the global economy writ large. And AI can be used again to really think about and help support an understanding of these drivers as well. So whether it's organizations like Global Fish Watch that use AI to monitor fishing vessels, to monitor for illegal fishing, or satellite images being used to identify where illegal logging is going on. There are a whole range of opportunities to deploy AI to support driver monitoring. Next slide, please. So once you've got the data on monitoring and trends, then you need to actually have do something about it, and that's where the policy side of things comes in. Good biodiversity policymaking relies on good data analysis to support policy prioritization, design, implementation, enforcement, and impact monitoring. AI isn't really currently being used significantly in these processes, but it has the potential to create a real step change. So for example, the Captain project uses reinforcement learning to train AI models on the areas of the planet that could be prioritized for conservation. So there are some interesting areas bubbling up. But at the moment, it feels like there's a bit of a lack of awareness among policymakers about what the opportunity is in this space and how to start deploying some of these systems. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So there are 4 key sectors that have a particularly high impact on biodiversity: food, infrastructure, energy, and fashion. And as you can see from the image here, food has an outsized impact, accounting for roughly about 50% of the pressure on biodiversity loss. AI can be used to help optimize new business paradigms in these sectors. So for example, when it comes to food, a lot of the pressure on biodiversity comes from livestock-based farming, and we can use AI to do things, for example, such as developing plant-based meat alternatives. So, for example, plant-based substitutes. These particular things identify plants that have a potential to create meat and dairy substitutes, require teams to identify as many candidate plants as possible, analyze each plant down to the molecular level, and predict how combinations of them will interact. But the scale and data and complexity of the patterns means that AI offers the potential to accelerate progress. So that's just one example, but throughout all of these sectors that we care about when it comes to biodiversity, there are ways of developing new paradigms and using AI to help do that. However, at the moment, funding for these kind of initiatives is somewhat limited, and understanding the potential of AI is still quite low. And there's really a lack of standardized metrics for biodiversity impact data in these sectors at the moment, which is holding back progress. Next slide, please. So in terms of the common challenges, at the moment, we're seeing issues around data, issues around funding, issues around capacity building and awareness. And in a way, these are quite general to AI. These are challenges that are experienced across the AI spectrum, not specific to this sector, but also they have very particular flavors in this sector. So challenges around data, data collection in biodiversity hotspots can be deemed to be undermining local communities' data usage rights. This is a really key issue in some areas and really needs to be prioritized. We're seeing a limited geographical spread of data around between the global north and the global south, and especially between species, with more charismatic megafauna having more data, and also a lack of driver data on biodiversity drivers. When it comes to funding, we're seeing a lot of funding targeted at developing new technologies and startups, but not so much around scaling up AI for biodiversity projects. There is some philanthropic funding, which is how a lot of the projects that I've talked about get off the ground. However, there are challenges in accessing this, especially for organizations in the global south. And then there are just issues around capacity and awareness. Organizations working on biodiversity are still trying to understand what the opportunities are and how they can deploy them and bring the capacity on board needed to do so. Next slide, please.
If you look, because we're already running quite late, these are the recommendations. We'll keep them for discussion later on, because I really want to hand over the floor to Lama and Arno. Johannes, and thanks a lot for the hard work. We'll come back to that. I know there's a lot, and it's another testament to the intensity of the work that is happening and needs to happen further. Over to you, Johannes, too.
Yeah, very, very quickly, because Lama and Thomas actually needed at the parallel session. So they'll present their work on data institutions for climate migration. And then afterwards, we can take questions and comments from the audience on the reports. So over to Lama and Thomas.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Can we start the slides? Perfect. So I will be presenting ongoing work that we've been doing at the Data Governance Working Group on data institutions for climate migration in the Lake Chad Basin region. So it's joint work with Thomas, who will be presenting a bit later. Next, please. So the Lake Chad Basin region, which is composed of Nigeria, Niger, Chad, and Cameroon, has been grappling with a humanitarian crisis with over
3.2 million people displaced. And this is due to floods, drought, farmers herders conflict, food insecurity, etc. So one of the main reasons is that one of the largest, like the lake itself is one of the largest freshwater bodies in Africa, and it has shrunk by 90%. Next, please. So you might have seen recently in the news the sad news about the floods in Nigeria and all over the region, which are causing a lot of more displaced people. Next, please. So the main objective of the project is to explore how data institutions such as data collaboratives could enable an environment of trust for the development of AI applications that could help make a difference in climate-induced migration by helping inform mitigation and adaptation strategies. And also, an important objective is to empower local organizations and communities to play a more active role in the data value chain. Next, please. So the work will be done in 3 phases. The fieldwork has been recently completed, and the main objective was to try to understand the status quo, understand the challenges and gaps in the climate migration data ecosystem in the Lake Chad Basin, and opportunities for improvement. And the next phase will be a co-design phase where we work together with the different actors in the ecosystem to come up with solutions and propose ways to improve how data is being collected, stewarded, and used. And finally, we would like to operationalize some of those solutions with partner organizations in the field. Next, please. So now I'll pass it to Thomas to talk to go through the field work that he's been doing in Cameroon. To you, Thomas.
Okay, thank you so much, Lama. So for the concrete part of this project, I did a field work in Cameroon with the objective to engage with local organization to see how data are collected and stewarded in their context. For this, we consult first with IOM and UNHCR, and then after this first round of consultation, we design an interview guide that we share or we administrate to key informant and local organization in Cameroon specifically. And then we did the analysis and we report. So here for the next slide please. In the next slide you can see that our initial finding around 3 main points. So we map the different actors of in the data ecosystem related to climate and just migration. And we identify some gaps and challenges, and we highlight some opportunities. Next slide, please. Yes, in terms of actors, it appears that when it comes time to design the data collection tools, is mostly done by funding agency and international organization. Local organization and local governmental organization and non-governmental are just involved in the data collection process. When you take the rest of the chain, the value chain of data, you will see that it's mostly done by funding agencies and international organization. In the field, you will see that the big organization like IOM, GIZ, Plan International, are the one who are who are doing or funding this work. Next slide, please. In terms of challenges, we have also a lot of, we identify some gaps in terms of availability of climate mitigation data, participation of local organization community in the data value chain, and the sustainability of data collection activities. Next slide, I will not expand on it, just to give chance to Lama to share opportunities and the next step of our project. But you can go through the slide later to learn more about the gap and challenge. Thank you, Lama. You can.
Yeah, Thomas,
Yes,
can
you
we
can do that.
I think it would be good to maybe cover a little bit the three axes and then.
Very quickly, because we have an agenda which is again packed, and I'm sorry, there's so much.
So
and well done.
Let's go then. All right. So yeah, despite those challenges, there are many good opportunities. Mainly, many organizations are joining efforts to. Sorry, I lost the slides.
Yeah, we cannot see them. Yeah, they're back.
Yeah, great. So many, so there's initiatives to promote better data collections as well as better data solutions, such as the Africa Climate Mobility Initiative. And next, please. So for the next steps, we plan to convene different organizations in the ecosystem, local, nonprofit, and governmental organization to encourage national conversations among them and help design ways to increase dedicated data collection and stewardship of climate migration data, strengthen data exchange network and collaborations, and increase participation of local organizations in different parts of the life cycle. And most importantly, which is an issue, increase sustainability, ensure the sustainability of such effort, even in the absence of international funders, by looking at different incentive structures. So it's, as I said, it's a work in progress. We plan to publish a report sometime in winter covering the findings and recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Yanama. And Thomas, congratulations. I think this kind of work that epitomizes a lot what we want to be doing going forward. Bridge the gap between theory and practice and focus on the global south. That's one of the positive news coming out of the COP27 is a commitment towards the global south. We are really running out of time, but I really want to hear if there is any questions or comments from the floor, and there is room for one question and then try and make them brief, and we'll get them together. Stephanie, if you are there in the room, because we don't see the room.
I am
the
up
floor
with
is
the
open,
microphone,
and we'll keep it
opening
short.
the floor to if anybody has a question for our lovely speakers and panelists. Maybe? Anybody? Yes? Excellent.
And please introduce yourself. This will help us.
I'll face the camera, even though it feels awkward. Ben Gill from Australia, Asia Pacific Head for Brainbox AI. I was just intrigued by one of the early slides on climate change and organisations' approaches to using AI for climate change, particularly around opportunity identification. My sense is a comment followed by a question. My sense is that when organisations, landlords, big industrial emitters look at opportunities, they're not looking at it through the lens of AI. They're not looking at it as how can we use AI to do this, but more what are the opportunities to move to net zero or along that journey. And AI may be one of the solutions. So I'm intrigued as to some of the recommendations as to whether that be data governance, whether that be upskilling, whether that be, I guess, hand-holding organisations in their approach specifically to AI. I appreciate within this forum it's hyper-relevant, of course, I'm not knocking it, but it would appear that most corporates will take a broader view on opportunities. Any thoughts on that?
Thank you very much.
It's a big one. It's a big one. Peter, what are you going to Summit 3? Try and keep your answer brief, and then because that's a big one and very relevant one. Go ahead.
Thanks for the question, Ben. I think there are a couple of answers to this. One is that I think some organizations definitely, probably the majority of organizations come from the perspective, as you say, of identifying what their business needs are, their challenges are, and then working out what technologies can help them address those needs. There are some organizations that are coming slightly more from an AI perspective, who are looking to apply AI across their operations and looking for opportunities to do so. But I think both approaches are valid and can be supported. But I think what you'll see over time is you get, regardless of the approach taken, you will get organizations noticing that they are using AI more and more in different use cases, and as a result, needing to build out the relevant infrastructure for those, whether it's data, whether it's digital compute resources or so on. So I think regardless of the approach taken, I think the needs and the prerequisites will remain broadly the same.
Thanks a lot, Pete. Stephanie, is there any other burning question or comment? Otherwise, we'll give the floor to Arunima to present Firehead.
I don't see any other burning questions right now. Maybe we'll have some more at the end, but I think we should hand it off to you.
Then over to you, Arunima.
Thank you, Nico. Can we get the slides on? Yeah, I'll be talking briefly about one of our initiatives at the World Economic Forum in the AI and climate space. This is the FIRE8 project. We can move to the next slide. So in recent years, we have witnessed countries around the world, from the US, Argentina, Brazil, Italy, Greece, and Australia. They have been gravely affected by wildfires. And this has resulted in many human and animal deaths, as well as the loss of millions of hectares of forest. And the heat waves and wildfires across Europe are causing alarm, with warnings that some countries could be in for their worst fire seasons so far. And a recent UNEP report warns that the number of wildfires will rise by 50% by 2100, and governments need to be prepared to face this situation. Wildfire disaster management, it requires solutions for fire prevention, forecasting and detection, risk and response management. It is a highly time-sensitive process, and it requires on-the-spot decisions and communication of information at a very rapid pace. And we have seen that AI offers promising applications in the pre, intra, and the post-wildfire events. And digitizing fire data to leverage the power of AI technologies hence becomes very important. We need relevant data, we need better and more integrated algorithms for an intelligent end-to-end system to fight wildfires. And with this in mind, the World Economic Forum, in collaboration with Coach Digital and the Turkish Ministry of Forestry, have initiated this FIRE8 project, which leverages AI to develop a dynamic risk map, optimized resource allocation, and response proposal for wildfires. And to do this, we have been building a multi-stakeholder community consisting of experts from diverse disciplines across the world, which will help foster technological collaboration and also exchange of scientific knowledge in fire management and research. Next slide, please. So in July and August 2021, a series of more than 200 wildfires burnt 1,700 square kilometers of forest in Turkey's Mediterranean region. And forced into action by this wildfire season in Turkey's history, Coach Digital is using integrated AI algorithms and bringing together all the relevant data, and has been working in building a binary classification model in which fire instances are positive events and non-fire instances are negative. And this model can also give a probability of fire occurrence, which can then be converted to several classes of high danger, etc. And the wildfire risk models have been deployed, and they have also started building the resource optimization models. We can move to the next slide. This is a few details on the work done so far. So the Coach project team has decided to do two different granularities of the model. The first one, they have considered sub-district directorates that are 332 in total for the regions of interest. And the second granularity is the partitions within the sub-district directorates, and they have 65,000 partitions in this modeling. And for each granularity, extensive feature engineering has been done. And for each directorate is included the land area of different types of forests, which includes coniferous forests, rocky areas, burnt areas, etc. And with all combinations of closeness and age, water mass, statistics for elevation, slope and aspect, population density, length of power lines, etc. And with this data, the historical fire data has also been combined. And in total, 380 features have been used in this classification model. And similar feature engineering has also been done for the partition granularity. And an overall, you can just click on the slide, an overall accuracy of 71% has been achieved for the moment. And that is the accuracy of predicting both the fire and the non-fire instances on a balanced sample set. The data science team at the Coach Digital, they would welcome any discussions with experts in this field on this topic. And if we can move to the next slide, I'll take you through the overall plan of this initiative. So we are working with Coach Digital in Turkey on the pilots, and we have also been joined by a project team from Deloitte. Deloitte's leadership in the AI for wildfire space will further strengthen our work in this area. There are also several other ecosystem players from the private sector and governments, and also some of the C4IR affiliate centers of the World Economic Forum who are now working on this problem together and have joined the project community. We are piloting, as I said, in Turkey. We also plan to pilot in other regions. We will aggregate the pilot learnings and scale to other climate-similar situations and some of our C4IR affiliate networks, centers. We will continue to scale and aggregate these lessons and create open source repositories of AI models and data sets and explore the development of automated dashboard prototypes to empower our stakeholders. So we would welcome you to join the community by providing data, insights into wildfire sciences and also some of the applied technological domains. We would ask you to volunteer to test the frameworks and tools when they are completed and also help us scale this geographically in different regions. And further to this specific use case, the AI platform at the World Economic Forum is also exploring other initiatives in the AI and climate space. So that's a quick summary of the initiative, and we would welcome more collaboration and engagement from the stakeholders in the space. Thank you, and back to you, Nico. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, dear Arunima, and congrats on the project. We'll now have the last presentation, project presentation, or last report, and I'll hand over to Johannes and Celine from the OECD, and then we'll have a short Q&A, and then we'll move towards the announcement with our government representatives. So over to you, Johannes and Celine.
Perfect. Thank you, Nico. So if we can get the slides up, and I'll be very quick, being conscious of time. So my name is Celine Kyra. I'm an economist at the OECD AI unit, and welcome today. So it's really great to see so many of you familiar faces actually in the audience. So Marco, Deputy Minister Kennedy, our colleagues from the UK AI office. So really great to see you. So we'll be very brief here. We're going to summarize the report that we actually launched last week at the OECD Virtual Pavilion at COP27. With a panel discussion. We had representatives we had over 600 registrations with participants from Africa, Latin America. We had the Energy Deputy Minister from Costa Rica and private sector and civil society representatives. So if we go to the next slide, so that's Johannes and I presented a summary of the report. So next slide, please. So what essentially is the report? So you may have heard of this term being used, and it's called, the green and digital twin transitions. And this is essentially the notion that we have these two mega trends occurring at the same time. And so mass digitalization, but also the need to meet climate goals. And so this, the twin transitions are this belief that digital technologies should be leveraged and can be leveraged for a sustainable future. And so we've heard many applications today in the context of AI, and this is already happening. AI is already helping to enable sustainability solutions. I won't go into all the examples you see here, but essentially interesting tools. AI tools like digital twins, for instance, which model complex systems, are being used to model complex climate impacts. And another interesting example we found is this mine in Norway that was transformed into a data center, and it reuses uses renewable energy from the local fjords nearby, and it uses excess heat from the data center to actually power nearby homes, which is called district heating. So there are plenty of interesting examples. These are just a few. And if we go to the next slide, but you know, while these are all very exciting, we also must ask, what resources do AI systems themselves use, and is the consumption of resources growing? So the short answer is yes. So over the last decade, the computational needs of AI systems have grown by hundreds of thousands of times, entering what some have called the large-scale era of compute. And here you see one graphic from Sebia et al., illustrating this trend from milestone machine learning systems. And this was probably spurred on by the advent of deep learning around 2010, and also the prevalence of large language models more recently. And so, but also, what do we mean by computational needs? And so while AI is, can be perceived as this abstract, non-tangible technical system, it is actually enabled by physical infrastructure and hardware together with software. And this is what we call AI compute. And if we go to the next slide, but why is this problematic? And so, simply put, training and using AI systems also consumes natural resources, as we've heard today, electricity, water, and associated carbon emissions, for example. And if we look at data centers, which are a key component of AI compute and ICT infrastructure, you see here some recent headlines on the slide raising sustainability concerns. And so in some areas, regulators have actually announced moratoriums on new data centers due to their energy consumption, and even considering bans on new housing projects, so residential housing, because energy grids may not be able to support both data centers and residential houses. So this kind of trade-off is becoming problematic. And as we've seen over the summer, we've also had some extreme heat waves, and so meaning that the data centers may need even more energy to cool them as temperatures rise. And so, as the use of AI increases, governments and policymakers really need to understand what AI's environmental impacts are to make evidence-based decisions. And so this is really challenging, as we discuss in the report, because AI-specific measures are scarce and not widely available. And those that do exist tend to overestimate AI's negative impact. And so this begs the question, what is the environmental footprint of AI? This is the question that our report aims to answer. We interviewed dozens of experts and conducted a survey to inform the report. And I would just like to thank, again, a resounding thanks to all the experts who fed into the report, including those from GPAI. And the report is available on www.oecd.ai/footprint. And I will pass it over to Johannes now to give a quick overview of the framework presented in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Celine, and a very quick overview of the framework, as many of you have probably already seen it. The way we differentiate, if we could have the slide up, please. Yeah, so the way we differentiate environmental impacts is we differentiate by direct and indirect environmental impacts, which is a framework that a lot of researchers already use, and a lot of the experts we've talked to actually look at AI impacts in that way. So the direct environmental impacts have to do with what we call the AI compute resource lifecycle, consisting of production, transport, operation, and end of life of the physical infrastructure of AI compute. On the other hand, indirect environmental effects relate to the impacts of AI compute applications. And here we have both positive and negative impact. Very quickly, to illustrate the resource lifecycle, if we imagine a networking server, one of the key components of the AI compute stack, then we first need to extract resources like aluminum and copper, then manufacture, assemble, transport, and then in the operations, we have a lot of energy consumption, water consumption, and an associated carbon footprint. And at the end of life, it's collected, shipped, dismantled, or recycled. That is that relates to the direct environmental impact. On the indirect side, we have positive impacts such as sectoral applications when we use AI for electricity grids, climate mitigation and adaptation such as AI for flood prediction, and using AI for environmental modeling and forecasting. On the negative side, we do have some harmful sectoral applications such as using AI for oil and gas exploration. We can see carbon leakage, meaning actually resulting in a net increase in emission. And AI can also influence consumption patterns and rebounds effect in a negative way for the environment. Next slide, please. So how do we actually ensure that AI is part of the solution, not part of the problem of meeting global sustainability targets? Well, in order for us to assess that, we need to be able to measure those impacts. And for that, we have 5 key findings in the report with certain policy implications. First is that measurement standards for sustainable AI are needed across the board. Some of those are already in place, but there's no real central authoritative place for measurement standards. And those are needed for greater comparability between countries and to accurately assess the impacts of AI. Second, we need to increase the data collection on environmental impacts. Also across the board, we've seen some national statistical offices, some environmental agencies started that work, but it really needs to be expanded across pretty much all countries. Now, the third problem is within those data collections, the AI-specific measurements are very difficult to separate from general purpose compute. We've seen some emerging indicators and some numbers from Google and others, but there's very limited data availability, and it's very hard to differentiate between, if we take a data center, general purpose compute, and how much of that compute capacity is actually used for AI. Number 4 is that we need to go beyond energy use and greenhouse gas emissions in terms of environmental impacts to include a variety of impacts along the value chain, which includes critical minerals, which includes resource extraction, which includes biodiversity preservation, as we've heard today. So energy and carbon is really a focus also of the research, but we need to look beyond those impacts to have a holistic assessment of the environmental impacts. And fifth, also what we've heard a lot today, is that we need efforts to improve environmental transparency and equity, particularly in the Global South. We've tried to include as much in the report as possible. Also today, we've heard a lot of examples, and that's one of the keys to include the Global South in those discussions, and to also share best practices from researchers that are working on efficient and environmentally sustainable AI to really increase those efforts. So that's it for us. I'll hand it back to Nicolas and to the announcements.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Johannes and Celine. Congrats on that great work, and let's take it forward, of course. Before we move to and hand over the floor to the government representative for the announcements, is there any burning question or comment in the audience over what we've heard in the 3 presentations we've just heard? And sorry again for the lack of time over participation. But over to you, Stephanie, if there is any burning comment or questions before we hand over the floor to our government representatives.
I'm looking. Anybody have a question they'd like to ask? Don't be shy. I know it's the end of a long day, but no, pretty quiet crowd here, Nico.
We cannot hear you. Maybe you're not talking.
You can't hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Okay. Well, sorry to inform you that it's a pretty quiet crowd here this evening. So no burning questions at the moment.
Well, the planet is burning, don't worry. It's not the questions. But no worries, it gives even more time for, and I want to again recognize and thank the governments of Canada and of the UK, and I think also obviously the local government of Quebec for their participation and leadership on that project. And over to you, Stephanie, for our representative in the room for the joint statement.
So I'll quickly take the floor for a few words. So as we just heard, AI is a technology with a great potential in the fight against climate change, and GPAI, as an organization with a global reach, can be an incredible forum to address these issues and present real and concrete solutions to the members. So today, CEMIA, Quebec, Canada, and the United Kingdom are very pleased to announce a new partnership to support one of the important recommendations from the GPAI RACE project. And that project will first have concrete results, and we hope have a concrete impact on the fight against climate change, and aims at the creation of a net zero data space, how we call it. So the project will be conducted in collaboration with the Center for AI and Climate, a UK-based organization. And this online data catalog will enable innovators and researchers to find data relevant to net zero transition and to climate resilience. So to present this new partnership, I'll invite representatives of the governments of Quebec, Canada, and the United Kingdom to address a few words. And we'll start with a recorded message from Céline Atayan, Parliamentary Secretary for the Ministry of International Relations and la Francophonie from Quebec. If we switch to the slides and to a video.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Je suis très heureuse de m'adresser à vous en ce 3e sommet du Partenariat mondial sur l'intelligence artificielle. Je veux remercier le Japon de nous accueillir. Aujourd'hui, c'est l'occasion de souligner un nouveau partenariat avec le département des Affaires, de l'énergie et de la stratégie industrielle du Royaume-Uni dans le cadre d'un projet piloté par le Centre d'expertise international de Montréal en intelligence artificielle. Le lien de confiance s'établit. Il est essentiel que de plus en plus de pouvoirs publics, tant au niveau national, régional que local, s'engagent à promouvoir le développement de l'intelligence artificielle éthique et responsable. Car c'est ensemble que nous parviendrons à faire une différence. La lutte au changement climatique, la protection de la biodiversité et la mobilité durable sont des défis planétaires. L'intelligence artificielle peut être un catalyseur pour l'accélération de l'action climatique, qu'il s'agisse de surveiller des stocks de carbone à l'aide d'images satellites ou encore d'optimiser le chauffage et la climatisation des bâtiments. Et c'est en travaillant ensemble que le partenariat pourra servir de point de référence mondial pour les problèmes spécifiques à l'intelligence artificielle et, ultimement, en faire la promotion. En terminant, le Québec est fier de soutenir les travaux des experts du Partenariat mondial sur l'intelligence artificielle, au sein duquel nous jouons un rôle actif depuis ses débuts. Le Québec continuera à en prôner le développement éthique et responsable qui sert les intérêts des individus et de la planète, en favorisant la croissance inclusive, le développement durable et le bien-être. Sur ce, félicitations pour ce nouveau partenariat. Je vous souhaite à tous un excellent sommet et des rencontres fructueuses.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Atayan and the Government of Quebec for their support to CEMIA and to the GPAI. Let me now pass the mic to Simon Kennedy, Deputy Minister for Innovation, Science and Economic Development, Canada. Simon?
Thanks very much. Bonsoir tout le monde. C'est un plaisir pour moi d'être ici avec vous. Thank you very much to the organizers of today's session, our colleagues at the Montreal Centre of Expertise in AI. We at Canada's Department of Innovation, Science and Economic Development have had the privilege to work with this team for a few years now. Their ability to connect domestic Canadian expertise with leading international AI projects is a testament to their hard work and to their reputation in the area of responsible AI. The Montreal Centre of Expertise plays a crucial role in supporting the substantive work of GPAI, ensuring experts and working groups have the tools they need to implement innovative, practical projects on responsible AI. And it is a point of particular pride to Canada that we are home to this Centre of Expertise. Indeed, it was an investment of $10 million from the Government of Canada, in addition to $5 million from the Government of Quebec, that led to the establishment of the Montreal Centre of Expertise for GPAI. I've been particularly proud as a Canadian, actually, of the leadership that Canada has demonstrated in GPAI, and of course it was Canada, along with France and other like-minded countries, that led the development and launch of GPAI back in June of 2020. It's an honor that we have been able to serve as the inaugural lead chair of GPAI for 2020-21, and we're very pleased to have been re-elected to the GPAI Steering Committee for the 2022-23 term. It's also wonderful to see other countries and partners stepping into leadership roles, as you have done today with the announcement of the significant new partnership agreement with the UK's Ministry of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Expanding international collaborative opportunities in AI allows us, as like-minded countries, to connect our leading experts and research institutions to share knowledge. The collective power of many countries' experts, bringing different perspectives, backgrounds, and research interests together, can help to propel those collaborating countries further than they could have gone on their own. And fundamentally, that is the goal of the Montreal Centre of Expertise. Through the work they are doing to support GPAI working groups and through their efforts to connect the Canadian AI ecosystem to the broader global AI community, they are leading the way in identifying and collaborating on partnership opportunities that allow us to scale up AI projects and amplify their impact globally. Je vais terminer mes remarques pour juste offrir mes félicitations à nos partenaires dans le centre de Montréal, Centre d'expertise de Montréal, et les experts des différents groupes de travail de GPAI qui ont avancé ces projets. I'd like to close by offering my congratulations to our partners at the Montreal Centre of Expertise and to the experts in GPAI working groups who have put forward the projects that have generated the interest and the partnerships on display here today. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kennedy, and for the continued and very precious support of the Government of Canada. And finally, representing the United Kingdom government, let me introduce you Blake Bauer, Director of Digital and Technology Policy, Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sports. Mr. Bauer.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to speak, particularly after such inspirational and exciting work that GPAI is doing in the areas of climate, biodiversity, and other important areas of global protection. I'm also conscious that for those of you in the room, I am the person standing between you and dinner. And so I will make this brief, and for colleagues dialing in from Europe, I'm probably standing between you and breakfast, so I hope that you'll feel equally as honoured by the short remarks. So I lead the Office for Artificial Intelligence, and the team there is responsible for the development of the UK's first national AI strategy. And in that strategy, we purposely recognise that AI technology can be used to solve big public policy challenges, such as achieving net zero. As the PM highlighted in his recent speech at COP27, the UK was the first major economy to legislate for net zero and has set ambitious commitments to reduce our emissions by at least 68% by 2030. And last year, we set out the policies and proposals for decarbonising the UK economy to meet our net zero target by 2050. We remain committed to that, but climate change is a global challenge which requires global action, and we believe international collaboration can unlock the enormous potential of AI to accelerate progress and innovation towards solutions. That's why we think this project is so important. An international climate data catalogue for AI-ready data sets will support key sectors to transition to net zero and support climate resilience. And so we are delighted today that our Minister for Science, Research and Innovation will announce a fund over 3 years to support this development of a net zero data space for AI applications. And for those of you hoping to know the scale of that announcement, I hope that that will be the dessert after dinner. For those of you in Europe, I suggest you keep checking Twitter. We continue to welcome Canada's work in the space and would restate the commitment from our friends in Quebec. The bond of trust has been established. We'd like to commend the work of the Global Partnership on AI and for the work of our wider global partners. Together, we can ensure that AI is used to deliver a fairer, more prosperous, and more sustainable world for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bauer, and to the Government of the United Kingdom for the continued support to GPAI work. And I think it's a great example of how a direct involvement of member countries of GPAI is crucial to really leverage the power and the potential of GPAI to create first a positive societal impact, and to also deliver added value to all of the members. So thank you very much. A few closing words. As Mr. Bauer was saying, we are the only ones keeping you from going to actually not dinner, but the cocktail to which you are invited on the same floor. So at your left, outside of the door. So thank you very much for everyone attending the session online and here in the room, and looking forward to continuing the collaboration. Thank you.